You're tuned in to Tax Talk DC with the Office of Tax and Revenue. Join us as we offer insights on the city's tax initiatives, share important resources for residents, and get answers to some of your most pressing tax questions. Now, here's your host, Jennifer Valentine.
Hello, and welcome to Tax Talk DC, where we break down the tax topics that matter most to you. I'm your host, Jennifer Valentine, and we've got another great episode lined up for you today. Joining me for this discussion is Mr. Olufemi Yomi Omatoso, Chief Appraiser for the Real Property Tax Administration within the Office of Tax and Revenue. Yomi and I will discuss the district's real property assessment process, including how property values are determined, the appeals process, and what technological improvements might be on the horizon. We're looking forward to sharing information that will help property owners better understand this process. So let's get into it, DC. Hi, Yomi. Thanks for being here today, and welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Jennifer. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much. All right, before we delve into today's topic, would you mind sharing with our listeners a bit about your background, what your current role as Chief Appraiser within RPTA entails, and how your role supports the core mission of OTR?
Thank you, Jennifer. My background is in real estate. I joined the Office of Tax and Revenue in 2009. And before then, I was an appraiser at Clark County in Las Vegas. Coming to the district in 2009, I started out as a commercial appraiser. I became the deputy chief appraiser, I believe, 3 years after I joined the office.
Okay.
And 2 years after, I've been the chief appraiser up till now.
And talk a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like and, how you support the mission of OTR.
That's a good question. The district has 200,000 parcels, and I always say that it's a very busy office, in keeping up with updating the records of all parcels, monitoring constructions, and getting ready for reassessment, which we do on an annual basis.
Okay.
So those are the things that we do on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Yomi, for that insight into your role. I think now we're better prepared to delve into our discussion about the assessment process. I'd like to frame the conversation by walking our listeners through the cycle for real property in DC. I think it's important to begin by explaining how market analysis is conducted by OTR and how it's used to determine property values. So you said this is an annual process. When does the market analysis occur, and what are the primary methodologies and data sources your office uses to determine the fair market value of a property?
Thank you, Jennifer. It is important to know that in the District of Columbia, the valuation date is always January 1 of every year. As I mentioned earlier on that, it's an annual cycle.
Right.
So you can look at it as January 1 to December 31st, that the data that we look at. So how we always maintain, fair market value is by monitoring, what the activities are in the market. Most importantly, looking at sales of properties that have occurred within the window of 1 year, that is from January 2 until December 31st, before, we have the valuation data as January 1.
Right.
Now, there are other things that we monitor as well, construction, and we look at, permits that are issued for improvements on buildings. Mm-hmm. So all these things are ongoing process that leads, to valuation on January 1 of every year.
Okay. All right. Now, DC has a wide range of property values with significant price differences between neighborhoods due to factors like location, proximity to certain amenities, home size, and then just local supply and demand, right? So considering the information you just shared about the district's valuation process, can you elaborate a bit on how you ensure fairness and equity in property assessments across all wards and neighborhoods in the district?
That's a very good question. Yes, DC has, a wide range of properties. We have residential properties, commercial properties. So let me focus first on residential properties,
Okay.
because they have the largest number of parcels that we have.
Okay.
Let me mention here that, the district, give or take, it's approximately 200,000 parcels of properties. residential, commercial, and some that we call immune property, or what people call exempt properties. That is, exempt properties are properties that belongs to government,
Okay.
DC government, and federal government. Those don't get taxed, but we still maintain records of those.
Got it.
Now, to answer your question, the district itself, at least in the assessment office, based on geography of the city, has been distributed into 72 unique neighborhoods.
Okay.
So that's how we see the commonality in these neighborhoods. So you can call them, their own sub-market within the context of the district in general.
Right.
So-
that makes sense. Okay. So once RPTA's assessment division has determined the fair market value of the property, tell me what happens next. Walk us through the rest of the assessment cycle. Talk about when assessments are issued, how billing works, maybe provide an overview of the appeals process, and include any key deadlines and the different levels of appeals that are available to district property owners.
Okay. Well, I think the question you ask is like 3 questions in one. So let me take them one by one, just
Okay.
for simplicity's sake.
Sure.
You see, assessment itself, which I call the valuation, I mean, you mentioned earlier on that what are the methods that we use.
Right.
Because we have 200,000 parcels, I mean, you would imagine that we wouldn't be able to touch each one of them every year, but we do,
Okay.
by a process called mass appraisal.
Right.
That process is looking at a universe of property, using what we call the standardized method of valuation to provide value, and using what we call statistical testing.
Okay.
In other words, instead of doing one property at a time, you get properties that are common. You use, the 3 methods of valuation accepted in the United States, which is the sales comparison analysis. That simply means you're looking at properties that are similar and looking at sales of similar properties to determine the value.
Right.
The second one is called the cost method, which is usually used for newly constructed property, or at least properties that are newer. Basically, what that is, you find, how much is it going to cost to build the building? If there's any depreciation, you take it away. And then you find how much, you will purchase the land. So a depreciated cost plus the land value will give you the value of that property.
Okay.
The third method is the income approach. That approach is usually, employed when you are dealing with income-producing properties. As I mentioned, we have quite, large market of income-producing properties, large downtown offices. So that method focuses on properties that are income-generating in nature.
Okay.
Now, concerning the assessment cycle itself, I mentioned earlier on that it's a whole year cycle every year. So we monitor some data, sales data, rents, expenses and all the rest, just to be able to do our analysis. Now, when we produce value on January 1, it is important to know that that January 1 date is for a future tax year. In other words, we're in 2025 now. When we say January 1 valuation date is going to be for tax year 2026.
Right.
So that allows us, when we render value, we send out, the assessment notice in the middle of February. So that leads to taxpayer having the opportunity to now appeal the assessment. I want to point out now that, at least maybe just to help our taxpayer to know that when they get the assessment notice, it is not the tax bill.
Right.
It is an advice as to the value of the property that they are going to get billed for the following year.
Right. Okay.
So the district also make it that when you get the assessment notice, you have almost, another 1 year before you even pay the taxes.
Right.
So we can go through and make sure that the values is accurate, or at least reflective of what the market or the fair market value of the property is.
Okay.
So that assessment appeal, the deadline for that, for filing it, is April 1st of every year.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like plenty of time to give everyone the opportunity to review and make sure that the assessment is accurate. So thank you for sharing that key information. Now let's dig a little bit deeper into what happens when property owners disagree with their assessments. Let's say, for example, I'm a property owner in the district. I just received my notice and I believe my assessment is too high. What is the best first step I should take? And what would you say is the most common misconception homeowners have about their assessments?
Well, so you receive your assessment notice, you believe or you feel like the assessment is too high. And I want to believe that what you mean by that is that if you want to sell your house on that day, you don't think, the value is what you're going to get in the market.
Correct.
And that's a common issue when people receive their assessment. The first step you should take is to file your first level appeal.
Okay.
At least you preserve, the right to understand how the office has come up with that value.
Right.
Because that's the only way, you can get the appeal processed. And it's easy because the assessment notice itself has some information. And let me point out as well that the information, on how to file the appeal, the dates to file the appeal, and where to file the appeal are represented or at least are listed in the assessment notice.
Okay.
Usually appeals are filed electronically. And that's the best way to do it. It's just a click of a button. And I will give, where you can file the appeal maybe later in the conversation.
Okay.
Now, once you preserve that, the other thing I think you should do as a homeowner is to look for what you think, helps you in terms of evidence to show to the office why you think the value is high.
Okay. And what types of evidence or comparable sales data are most effective?
The most effective data are usually, especially for residential building, are usually, recent sales, of similar type of property or similar type of home that you can find in your neighborhood.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier on that, the district, at least from the assessment standpoint, is divided into 72 neighborhoods.
Right.
But within those neighborhoods, we have sub-neighborhoods as well.
Oh, wow.
So the closer the property that you are comparing to yours is to your home, the better.
Got it. Okay. That's great information for property owners to have if they find themselves in a situation where they have to appeal their assessment. So thank you for that. Now, research indicates that there have been major shifts in the DC real estate market over the past few years due to factors such as interest rate changes, persistent commercial vacancies, and post-pandemic housing trends. How have these changes impacted overall property values and the assessment process in the district?
Well, that's a very good question because not only, what you have mentioned only affect, the residential real estate, it impacts, the commercial real estate as well.
Sure.
The good thing about the Office of Tax and Revenue is, I would say the level of sophistication that the office has in terms of monitoring the trends in the market. I will say that all the data that is available out there, that we monitor them as well. Number one, we get information directly from the property owners. We keep very good records of details of properties. Secondly, we monitor things like, if I mention things about commercial properties as well, we have database that we subscribe to that even the general public or people in the commercial real estate business also subscribe to as well. So what the market is looking at, we are looking at and analyzing ourselves. We have members of our staff whose job is generally to just analyze data alone. We call them the market analyst.
Oh, okay.
So when people give us their income and expense report, we analyze it, to distill certain indices or indicators in which we use for valuation. And then we look at, some other third-party surveys or publications or database, to make sure that, we're having consistent data in order for us to render assessment.
That makes sense. Okay, so in that same vein, let's talk about property improvements. How do activities like significant renovations or home extensions or additions get factored into a new assessment?
That's a very good question because sometimes that's where, people have I don't want to use the word controversy or at least comparison. When people do major improvements into their house, usually there's an expectation of the property being improved in value.
Sure.
Because you have now put some capital, expenses into it.
Right.
Now, number one, how we monitor that is when people pull the permit. We work closely with Department of Building. So when you go get a permit from the Department of Building, frequently we get those permits into our own database as well. That is what allow our appraisers to go out, to go monitor, the work that is going on. And what we use that for is just to make sure that we are updating the records of the property accurately.
Okay.
So that our record is reflective of that improvement. Now, when we're now doing, the assessment, we're able to categorize properties that have been improved versus properties that have not been improved. And you begin to see, if a property that has not been improved sell, and a property that has been improved also sold as well, you can categorize them and see the difference in value as to, and that's what helps us to be able to, estimate values of different categories of property.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Now let's shift gears a little bit and look to the future of RPTA's assessment division. Are there any technological innovations like the use of aerial imagery, machine learning, AI, that the assessment division is currently using or considering using in the future to make the valuation process more efficient and accurate?
That's a fantastic question. I think one thing I will say about Office of Tax and Revenue or the Office of Chief Financial Officer is that we're a forward-looking organization. Right now, we've deployed, so many technology in the past. For instance, I will say we are one of the very few jurisdictions that have our income and expense report submitted to us electronically. Mm-hmm. And recently, I think in just about 6 months ago, we deployed what we'll call the mobile assessment technology. And let me say a little bit about that technology.
Sure.
This is where our appraiser goes to the field with iPad. And you mentioned, monitoring permits, or I mentioned monitoring permits earlier on, and updating the record of a property.
Right.
I think it's a very good tool that brings transparency into what we do. In summary, what that does is if I come to your property and I have to update the record, I can stand with the property owner and I can do the update right in front of you.
In real time.
In real time, and you can see, the changes made in the system in real time.
Yeah.
Before, we used to go to the field with paper. Mm-hmm. We pick up, what we pick, and then we come to the office to come and update the record. This technology allows us to do an update right in the field and in real time. So I think, that's a very great tool that it brings efficiency into what we do, and it brings transparency, to the property owner as well. Absolutely. Now, looking into the future, we all know that, the chatter everywhere now is artificial intelligence or machine learning. I think, the office is in that, it's in forefront of that as well, because we're always looking to advance, the technology that we use. And I'm sure that as those opportunities present itself, we will be, in that process as well.
Okay, that sounds great. Now, looking ahead, what is the biggest challenge your office anticipates in maintaining accurate and equitable property assessments in this evolving DC market over the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Well, I wouldn't call it a challenge, so to speak, because, things are always evolving. Mm-hmm. And we know that we just finished talking about artificial intelligence now. I think one of the issues that assessment office, not only ours, but I think assessment office generally have to be looking at, issues that can arise from the using of artificial intelligence. I will mention, maybe two. One is the area of ethics. What I mean by that is, we now use, area imagery technology. So you have to be looking at, what are the legal challenges that can present in terms of privacy issue.
Sure.
And then two, this technology itself, how does human expertise factor into it? Because machine learning itself is to looking at the data that exists and kind of predict a pattern.
Sure.
So if you don't have that human element in making sure that you have accurate information, it's going to be quote unquote garbage in and garbage out.
Right.
And that can present itself another challenge, for the office.
Right.
And then maybe the final thing is public trust, in terms of, these artificial intelligence or machine learning. And that itself too can, present some legal challenges. You understand? Can the public trust the information? Even can our office trust, the information? So those are the few things that I think as we look at, employing AI in doing, our work, all those areas, we really have to, make sure that, we're monitoring them and providing solutions as we go forward.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, now before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about the assessment process? And what would you say are the key takeaways from today's discussion?
Thank you very much. One thing that I like, people who are listening to us to understand is that Office of Tax and Revenue is customer focused. We're customer centric. The taxpayer of the district are our customers, and we want to satisfy them, as much as we can. The second thing is that I want them to know that our office is very transparent as to our processes.
Right.
I encourage people to go online. If you're looking for information, we have vast amount of information. We have many publications, that explain how assessment is done. Our models are built, and a lot of data is available. I mentioned earlier on, too, in terms of when people appeal their assessment, you can actually go online and see sales that have occurred, in your neighborhood. There's opportunity there. If you go to mytax.dc.gov, you can search your property and you can search, similar properties that have sold. So the takeaway here is, one, know that the office, is transparent. We're here to always help and to answer any question, as touching assessment as much as we can. The other thing too is that I want, people to understand as well that anytime, any day, they can always call us and take advantage of, our public outreaches, because we use that to come to the community to explain what we do. So if there's any, information that we're having a public outreach somewhere, if it's close to their neighborhood, we encourage them, to participate.
Yes, that's a great idea. Now, if our listeners have questions about their assessment notice or the process in general, if they need to make a payment, I know they can visit mytax.dc.gov. You also mentioned they can call. So who should they contact? What's the phone number?
Well, we have our customer service, center that is always triaging any calls. Mm-hmm. But the number that people can call is 202-727-4829.
All right. And the one last thing that I wanted to mention, you mentioned that folks can go online and search their property and, similar properties in the area. I just wanted to make sure we clarify that property information is public information in the district, and therefore all that information is legally available to them.
That's correct.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap up today's episode. I would like to thank our amazing guest, Olufemi Yomi Omatoso, for joining us to share his expertise and to break down the complexities of the real property assessment process. It has been an absolute pleasure talking tax with you today, and we truly appreciate your time. To our listeners, we hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did, and that these tax tips will be of value to you. Remember, visit mytax.dc.gov for more information and to manage your taxes with ease. We're We're looking forward to bringing you another great episode, and we hope you'll join us next time. Until then, I'm Jennifer Valentine, and thanks for listening to Tax Talk DC.
Thanks for tuning in to Tax Talk DC with your host, Jennifer Valentine. For more information and resources, visit mytax.dc.gov.